Welcome to the Stories with Traction podcast. I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Thank you for joining us as we uncover how stories are one of the most important aspects of your business. We'll talk about struggles, victories, and how you can utilize strategic storytelling to inspire those around you to action. Enjoy this episode. As a society, we are not properly getting the next wave of entrepreneurs ready for success. And I think there's a couple reasons for this. One of them is the generation coming on into leadership positions. We've told them ad nauseum that they're special and that they can do whatever they want. And we've really bombarded them with motivational quotes and sayings. That, in addition to social media, where people have an instant mindset. They don't want things quickly anymore. They want things instant. And then when people get into entrepreneurship, when they start their own business, they realize that it's not as easy as they might have thought. So I'm excited for this conversation because I want to dive into the meaning of the word grit, what it actually means to be a leader, not the glitz and glamour, but what it truly means to be a leader that is built for growth and understands grit. So I'm excited for this conversation because today I am joined by John Romanowich, who is the president and CEO of SightLogix. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks, Matt. Glad to be here.
So I really appreciate what you do, John, and I appreciate a conversation that we had a few months ago because you said a few things to me that really stuck with me, and that's why I had invited you to be a part of the show. You had talked about fear, how fear is a really powerful driver within people, and you talked about different elements of leadership that I don't think enough people are talking about. You talked about the nitty-gritty and how challenging it can be to take an idea, get it to market, and truly deliver for one's customers. I don't think enough people are talking about that. We truly have built a society of putting people on pedestals and the glitz and glamour and all these different things. We're seeing the highlight reels, but behind the scenes, you know that there's a different situation. It does take a tremendous amount of strength to do what you've done. So I want to talk about that. And before we dive into that, I want people to know a little bit more about you, what your organization does. So could you give us the rundown of what SightLogix does?
Sure, glad to do that, Matt. So SightLogix is in the business of security outdoors. And what we do for security is we've created smart outdoor cameras. So what does it mean? What it means is that you basically have a camera on the outdoor of your home or facility. And if a person's there, it will detect that person, put a red box around it, and then send an alert somewhere. In the case of very critical infrastructure, things of national consequence for the government, or say data centers or big critical assets, that would typically go to a specialized operating center that is focused on those particular assets. So, for example, the government's not going to outsource to Acme local security or something. They're gonna monitor it themselves, and perhaps they could even have a military component. If you are securing something more like a home, then what these new technologies like what we do are doing is they're basically an extension of your burglar alarm panel at your home. So if you happen to have an alarm system at your home or office, you would set it and would leave, and it would basically make sure that nobody's been in or out of your home. Well, what we've done is we've extended that outside the walls of the building out to the perimeter of your property. So, for example, again, we do everything from high-end homes to all the way up to things like data centers and sprawling assets like that. But just a very practical example, if you think about like your home, if somebody's going to break in your home, they're probably not going to, in the middle of the night, take your front door off or cut a hole in it. They're probably going to come in through your backyard somehow. And once they're inside your home, you're kind of in trouble because if you happen to be in your home and you startle them because they didn't expect you to be there, well, you might actually get hurt. So that's not a good situation. It really depends on the criminal, of course. So the whole idea of this thing is to basically provide such an early warning system that long before somebody's actually in a vulnerable spot, you can kind of scare them away. And this works really nicely if for example, if somebody comes in your backyard and all of a sudden there's like a spotlight right on them, well, that might say, I don't know what this is all about, right? Same thing with say a car lot. I have a bunch of BMWs or Mercedes outside, and these cameras could detect something so far that the person can't even see the camera. So they could be 100 meters away, and this system can detect them day or night, zero light. It could even be raining out or snowing out. And all of a sudden, there could be an audible annunciation saying, thank you for coming to our car dealership. Please come back during normal daylight hours, right? And
That's awesome.
And then if they persist in walking in to steal those catalytic converters or headlights, well, at that point, perhaps the system would say, look, Mr. So-and-so in the red shirt, we advise that you leave as soon as possible. We call the police.
Oh,
so
wow.
so you can start out friendly, because you got to remember, in a car lot, people are often there because they're shopping on their way home from their night shift or something. They want to see the new cars that are out there. So you don't want to be too pushy up front, but you can escalate. Obviously, in very high security, it's a very different thing, and that's why it's self-secured. So.
Wow.
So it's very exciting. So imagine bringing the world of security outdoors, right? You can prevent some really big problems.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So essentially, you're taking security cameras and you are building in artificial intelligence, it almost sounds like, all these different things. So you're radically expanding the scope of what it truly means to be secure. And that is awesome. So was there a big awakening or an aha moment where, I don't know, maybe you were in school or maybe you were in a certain job where you knew that this was a need in the marketplace? What was your big aha moment where you knew that this needed to be pursued?
Well, it's kind of interesting, because I can't say it was just like one aha moment. It was like a series of different things that happened. But I think it's also important to point out that, like, I was literally like built for this, like this. I was like born from the ground up to do what I do. Like it's hard to explain, and I don't know how deep and far back it goes. It might even go back to the culture of my grandparents, as far as I'm concerned. But as an example, my grandfather was a photographer, so he found visual images interesting, right? But what really struck me was, I had a very fortunate occurrence. I was going to my senior year of college, and at New Jersey Institute of Technology in Newark, New Jersey. And there was an opportunity for a fellowship, and with a very famous professor out of a place called the David Sarnoff Research Center in Princeton, New Jersey. And he was going to pick 2 students to basically work on night vision cameras, basically military-grade cameras that could detect people in the dark or any time of day or night, or through fog, or through smoke or anything like that. And I was fortunate enough to receive that full fellowship for my master's degree. So I got to work very closely with some of the brightest video people on the planet, because, as some of you may know, color TV was invented in this David Sarnoff Research Center. So that's the Caliber Research Center. So anyway, that was kind of like the first piece of it. Now I'm interested in these night vision video. And the more I could start to look at and think about the power of these cameras, like seeing in the dark with zero light, seeing through fog, like all these different characteristics, I actually realized at that time that this was like the perfect underpinning for security. But the eyes alone were not enough. We had to connect the brain to it. Okay, but that brain was like a supercomputer, right? So you had to put it together inside the camera, a really good eye and a really good brain. So that was like kind of the first layer of this. Then, while I was in the process of doing that, I went off. I created another small company, and then some of my friends called me back to the startup labs and said, "Hey, we're building this company called Pyramid Vision. Can you help us do it?" So I ended up becoming the general manager of that. And while general manager, this was right around the 2000 timeframe. while general manager of that company, I was invited to the World Trade Center site after the Twin Towers had come down. And at the time, it was like just a big construction site. It was like a crater. Like you could see where they were redoing the E and F trains in New York City at the bottom of the pit. And it was a really touching thing because you knew it was there, And but I started thinking about, okay, so we're going to take these cameras and we're going to put these servers there. I'm going to put wireless. And it basically came down to like, this is impossible. Like this can't even be done with the best of the best technology. It would cost a ridiculous amount of money. So really all they were left with at the time was basically guards to monitor the site. So that was like a kind of phase two. So first one was realizing these sensors can do this, that they can work day and night, and that they needed a brain behind them. But then having this other aha moment, like this is really a need. Like there is no solution to this problem. So my thinking has evolved over the years, but I basically came to this idea: what if you could just basically have a camera, point it, and have protection? Just like that. Like I want to detect people's. And SightLogix has been working on that for about almost 18 years now. And we're really close. And we're using artificial intelligence. We're using all these advanced technologies, but we're getting to that point. And the first cameras that we made were as much as $80,000 each. And now we have these smart thermal visible cameras that are now, in the just a little over $1,000 range. So that's how far the technology's come. And often our customers are surprised when I tell them that my goal is really to increase the performance and keep lowering the price. And very frankly, the reason for that is because I believe that these technologies can become pervasive, because there's nobody should be allowed to come in your back door into your house without foreknowing it and preventing it. And I believe that these technologies are well on the way to getting there, and we intend to be one of the leaders in doing that.
Sure. No, that's fantastic. So let's talk about the idea versus the reality, because everything that you're saying, obviously, you have this idea, and in theory, it sounds awesome. It just sounds like a fantastic idea. And then reality sets in where you're doing everything you can to take this product to market. How challenging it was for you to do that? So take us through like just the grit and the challenge of taking an idea and getting it to become a reality.
Oh God. Yeah. So, it's the kind of thing that I'm a very high commitment type person. And I knew that I would, do the best I could, and that I wouldn't stop unless something stopped me. But it was challenging beyond my worst nightmares, quite frankly. We have raised about 20 million in debt and equity, all from individuals. There's no real institutional money involved, and it was done because we always realized that if we brought in some capital and we couldn't hit these hockey stick, type scenarios, that basically we would lose control and lose the company. So this goes really to the grit of the whole situation, where I was very fortunate in that my founding team is as gritty as I am. James Zaun, my chairman, and Danny Chin, my VP of engineering, who has probably about 50 patents at this point. All three of us kind of came together, and we all had kind of like the same mindset and the same level of commitment. And when I say commitment, I'm talking about like a soul level commitment, like a level of commitment where you go in the direction, like almost like you're blindfolded, like you know where you want to go, but everything says you will not get there. Everything. So I mean, there are so many times where basically, if we didn't get a capital infusion within a few weeks, we'd be out of business. And we like lived through this over and over and over again. And the problem is that we could have, addressed this at almost any time. We could have went to a large institutional investor, and they would have put the capital in. There's only one small problem. They would have wiped out all of our existing investors. Now, if you look at the investors in SightLogix, these are friends and family, and my own money, right? These are people that trust me, that believed in me, that I told them I will do this, and there was just no turning back. So literally from the beginning, from the very first capital raise, within 9 months, we were starting to run low on money and started to not take salary anymore and things like that. And we had to go back to some of these same friends and family who believed and trusted us enough that they felt like if anybody can make this happen, we wouldn't give up. And I like the Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger's the partner of Warren Buffett. He said that business moves at the speed of trust. And if there wasn't that level of that trust and that soul level commitment from myself and my other founders of the company, we just wouldn't be here. It wouldn't be possible. So what's grit in my mind? Grit is vision plus trust, plus this like soul level commitment. Like we could see what we wanted to do. We trusted each other, and we were all willing to go to the end of the earth to make it happen. And now it's starting to pay off.
Wow. Yeah. And I'm fascinated by the sheer commitment level. So I'm interested to know a little bit more about your upbringing and how you were positioned for this. And this might be a nurture versus nature type conversation, but can you think of anything in your past? Maybe it was, involvement with sports. Maybe it was an involvement with maybe a specific club within an educational institution. Maybe it was a parent. I know you had mentioned your grandfather being a photographer and his interest in photography. Can you look back to any instance that really primed you to have that type of commitment level?
Yeah, I definitely think it's kind of in the DNA of my family. Like I can remember, even like my grandmother, and by the way, they're all from that Polish-Ukraine area that is undergoing all that turmoil right now. So it's kind of interesting because I could see the grit in their battle, and then when I think about it, it's like, wow, that's kind of makes sense a little bit the way I think and do things because it's kind of like that grit. They're just not giving up. That's a really bad situation, So, Russian, Polish, Ukrainian is my background, but I saw to my grandmother, the things that she would do, would kind of surprise me, to sustain. So there was something about just never, ever, ever giving up. There was something about that, and just kind of because it just there's something about that kind of, again, soul level commitment that actually is there's actually there's some freedom in it. So let me give you an example. If I was in one of these situations where I had a choice, either I go and sell the company to private equity or something, and my investors get wiped out, well, I knew that if I was to take their money, that from a friend, that I wasn't going to stop. So because of that, I had the peace of mind of knowing that I was doing the right thing to the best of my ability. Because if they trusted me with more of their capital to keep this going, I was not going to sell out on them. If my commitment was anything short of that, then there would be almost like an ethics problem, because it would almost be I'm making them go to the mat and I'm not. Right. But I knew, and I think that most of my friends that invested and stuff like that kind of knew that about me. And I think that was obviously the reason why they were willing to trust that I would keep going.
Sure. So I really appreciate you mentioning your grandmother, and it reminds me a little bit of my grandmother. So my grandmother went through the Great Depression. And what's interesting about that to me is she never spoke about the horrors of the Great Depression. She only focused on the value that it provided her life. So my grandmother was an unbelievably trustworthy individual. She had tremendous grit, and she also had a ton of empathy. She was so empathetic, and she could connect with anyone because of what she battled through the Great Depression. And it's just interesting hearing from you being positioned to have a high level of trust and to create a company culture of trust. I really appreciate you mentioning that. I want to talk about recent challenges. Okay. So I want to talk about, clearly we're dealing with supply chain issues, inflation, geopolitical challenges. and you've still been able to deliver for your customers. So what has been the mantra that even though we are in very unprecedented times, I feel like the last few years, we're in some strange reality. How have you created a crystal clear vision for your team, and how have you been able to really get over these current challenges?
Well, I'm really fortunate because just like I was fortunate enough to help get my founding team, which consisted of Jim Hahn, Danny Chin, and another gentleman named Eric Schwab, who I knew for a very long time. The same thing goes for the rest of my team. There's something about our team that we just seem to attract people that are competent, very, very competent, world-class competence level, very, very hardworking, and believe in the vision. So it's not just a founding team, it's the other people that we've added along the way. So the whole team is really gritty. So just to kind of complete your question is that long before COVID, I was fortunate to get some good board members that helped me kind of get my executive team dialed in really well. And I managed to get, a really good vice president of sales and marketing, somebody that I really admire who basically thinks differently and more clearly about markets and how to do things than anybody I've ever met. Also a new VP of finance and operations who brought that rigor and that additional capability. And he brought another really interesting attribute, which is pessimism. He brought pessimism to things, like in a healthy way. In other words, because I'm such an optimist that sometimes I need a little bit of lead in my balloon sometimes, And so it's really good to have a visionary, optimistic CEO and a more pessimistic, more how we can make payroll tomorrow type of finance guy. And you put the two together, and you can get a very nice thing. So to me, it was all about preparation. And being prepared is all about having the right team. And if you have the right team, and that team is willing to work hard enough, you can basically overcome a lot of obstacles. I have this saying, and this is not my saying. Obviously, I'm bootlegging it from. I take the best ideas wherever I can get them. But the big don't eat the small. The fast eat the slow. And I always say that to my team. So if we're willing to have a meeting on a Saturday morning or a Friday night, or people are working through the weekends, not necessarily, but if necessary, that's an edge. That's something so that excitement around the vision that we're changing the world. We're literally creating an industry here from the ground up, right? So we have that passion behind all of us that kind of drives us to get it done. Get it done if it's a weekend or a week, or a night or whatever. We don't really stop. I mean, I'm always touched by, stories about people on my team when I find out that some people are getting up at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning because we have a customer in Dubai and they need technical support. So somebody's on the phone for 3 hours starting at 2 a.m. on a Saturday night because their weekends, it's shifted from ours, right? So these are the types of things that are going on all the time in my team, like from top to bottom. There's not a single person on my team that I don't admire, that is not far better at what they do than I could possibly do. Wow. So maybe that speaks to my incompetence, but if anything, it speaks to my trust and belief in what we've created, which is really fun and exciting.
Sure. No, I think it speaks to your leadership, right? You've created this incredible company culture, this team around you. I think it really does speak to your leadership. I want to make sure I have your verbiage right. You said the big don't eat the big don't eat the small, the fast eat the slow. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Very intriguing. I think that probably has become part of your DNA as an organization, because that is very, very important to unpack and understand. So I do have a question for you. This is more of a personal question, but I also think that everyone listening can get a lot of value out of this. So my 8-year-old, his name's Elliot, he is obsessed with marketing. So he has been watching tons and tons of marketing videos on YouTube. He's becoming quite the marketer, and he's actually presented me with some pretty interesting marketing ideas, which I'm fascinated by for his age. He's also tearing through books, right? So he is a ferocious reader, tearing through books. He's on a very high reading level. I really do believe he could do a lot of great when he gets older. And we've been talking a lot about business. I've brought him into a lot of strategy sessions with myself just to try to capture for him, hey, here's an idea, but here's how you make it a reality. What is one thing that you would recommend to someone at that age to get involved with to try to position him for the next wave of leadership? So think about where the world could be in the next 10 to 20 years when it comes to technology, when it comes to leadership. What are a few things that you would recommend a child at that age getting involved in, maybe getting exposed to something to position them to be a leader of the future?
It's a great question. I have kids myself, so I often think about things like that for them. And so first of all, I think I like the fact that you're mentoring them, right? So I would say, who else that has really good marketing besides his dad that he can learn from, you know? So that for sure would be one thing. I think that one of the best learning things I find these days are podcasts. Like, I love podcasts. I listen and listen and listen to podcasts. And I think that what would be really important for him, when I think of myself as a parent, besides all the basics, the Maslow's hierarchy, food, safety, and shelter, and all this,
Sure.
what I really think about is, how do I help them follow their passion? So I'm always looking for, like, what lights them up, because if I can create more opportunities and more experiences for them where they're lit up, then they're more likely to follow it in a stronger way.
Sure.
But the other thing that I think is really interesting is markets, right? Whether you're an entrepreneur or an investor, you don't want to be the one making, the buggy whips, when we're making electric cars now. So I would suggest that it would be really fun and interesting for him to look at the newest things, look at blockchain and crypto, look at stuff like that, and keep on exploring. Well, what would you do with this? Because I think at this point, my son is now is going to turn 21 this summer. I learn more from him than he learns from me at this point, no doubt. He's totally into crypto and blockchain, and he has taught me so much. Him and his friends have taught me so much.
Wow.
They've been investing for years in this stuff, and I'm like a slow follower. I didn't get it for a long time, but now he's teaching me. So you might find that some of your best ideas are going to come from your son. But I guess my point is that as I'm seeing this new world unfold, I'm just blown away by it. It's like, I think that this is the most disruptive thing that we will see in our lifetimes. I think It's that big.
Wow,
Yeah.
very interesting. Wow, very interesting. So let's take it one step further. So I mentioned my son who's 8. Let's talk about, if you were to speak to a class, a room full of individuals getting ready to complete their MBA, they're ready to go into the world. Maybe some of them have really good ideas. So maybe they want to go into business for themselves. Maybe some of them want to get involved in a certain corporate structure. What is one thing that you've seen along your journey that you would consider a lot of people that are leaving business school make as a mistake? What would be one mistake that you would say, hey, most people, they don't realize this is a blind spot, but this is a mistake that you've seen over and over again? Can you point to something like that? What would you tell them? Don't avoid this.
Yeah. So I guess I would say, follow your passion, not the money. Because if you're passionate about something, you'll make the money. This is one of my professors in college actually told these exact words to me, and I think it's one of the best things ever. You cannot build a company like what I'm doing if you weren't passionate about it. It would just be too hard. Like, you have to believe in it. You have to believe in it to your core. So look, if you want the thrill of New York City and you want to go to Wall Street, great. That's different if you're passionate about it, but don't do it for the money, because
Sure.
that's not a good life. If that's a really aggressive lifestyle that you better really want to do it. So I'd say that that's probably the most important thing. But it's also important to make sure that, I mean, you need a nice overlap, because again, you want your efforts to be meaningful. So you want to focus in areas that are the future. You don't want to be focused on areas that are the past. The other piece of advice I give to people is, like, if you go join a company that's known for the areas that you care about. Like I'll get a good example would be like in engineering. So I had this opportunity when I was graduating. I'm an electrical engineer by background. I had offers from Exxon and Belcor and different places that weren't a fit, because Exxon is more of a chemical company and Belcor was more of a software, and so I actually went to IBM right out of school. So for a brief period of time. But my point is that it's important, like that number one, where's your market? Like, what's the big thing that you can help make a difference in? Number two, are you kind of in your sweet spot of what they need, right? So lining all these pieces up, I believe, is really critical to having a fun, passion-filled life.
Sure. Well said. Yeah, very well said. Yeah, John, I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate this conversation. So I want to do a recap before we close out, because I think this is really interesting to me, and I think it'll be very interesting to my listeners. So I read a lot of biographies. I'm really passionate about reading biographies of individuals that have a lot of struggle victory stories. So they have an idea like you, and then how do they get it to market? How do they actually deliver for their customers? And I love going through biographies. And in the last few years, I've tried to find common threads throughout biographies. What makes someone really leave their mark on the world? And I started this list, right? So we could write out all these different lists. So what are the reoccurring themes? And I've actually found 3 reoccurring themes that actually dominated our conversation today, which I find very intriguing, which really puts you in alignment with a lot of these high achievers, very successful individuals that have left their mark on the world. So here are the 3 things that comes out of all these biographies that came out of our conversation today. Individuals such as yourself that are truly making an impact have a high level of curiosity. So you had started out by talking about your grandfather, about how he was a photographer. He was really interested in pictures and what makes pictures work, and lighting, and really capturing different images. You'd also mentioned that you were involved with some of the brightest video people on the planet. You had mentioned the story regarding the World Trade Center site that you were at and how much of an impact that left on you. That's part of the curiosity piece. Then I also found that most people that I've read about when it comes to biographies also have an obsession. So they start off with a curiosity and it goes to an obsession. Your vision, trust, and commitment is part of that obsession. You said business moves at the speed of trust, right? So that is an obsession. You've created an obsession around your team to really tie into a vision bigger than themselves, and understanding that you can't just have surface level trust, it has to run deep. So that's the obsession piece. And then the third piece that all these biographies had was grit. It's individuals that had a tremendous amount of grit. And I really appreciate what you said, John. You said, big don't eat the small, the fast eat the slow. I think that that's the mantra of grit, because it's positioned your company culture to have leadership that you do and have the team dynamics that you do. So I found it fascinating that during our conversation, you literally hit all 3 that I've extracted out of biographies that I've read of people that really leave their mark on humanity. So I really appreciate this conversation, John. I know you're an extremely busy individual, so I appreciate you spending your time with us today. And if anyone wants to get more information on what you do as an organization, maybe they want to go to SightLogix, check out more about your technology, where would they go? Where would you direct them?
Well, I would certainly direct you to the website, which is www.sightlogix.com, SightLogix. And if you wanted to reach out to me directly, if I can be helpful in some way to you, it's Romanowich@sightlogix.com.
Perfect. Awesome. I will include that in the show notes to make it super convenient for everyone. They can just click and go from there. But John, thanks again. I very appreciate your time, your wisdom within this conversation. I think that a lot of people will get a lot out of it. So thank you so much, John.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. If you have a story that you would like to share, feel free to drop an email to matt@mattzaun.com with the subject line Stories with Traction. Also, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, where I share tons of resources on how you can be a better storyteller. Remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.